Well, we just talked about what could make our bladder unhappy, some of
Mhm.
those like common bladder irritants. Let's talk about the positives. What can we do about it? So, what can we do to keep our bladder healthy? And I have to say, the number one
One.
thing, the biggest thing that you can do is drinking more water.
And more than
Typically,
you think.
yeah, a lot. So the rule of thumb, and this is kind of like, again, an average, is half your body weight in ounces. So me, for example, I weigh about 140 pounds. So I try to drink at a minimum 70 ounces of water a day. And how we drink it makes a difference too.
Yes, yes, absolutely. You want to sip that throughout your day.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I see a lot in the clinic is people have busy jobs, they're running
Mm-hmm.
around, they get up in the morning, they drink their morning coffee, and then they're really busy at work, and like they may not consume any water until lunchtime. And then they get really busy in the afternoon again,
Mm-hmm.
and then they're consuming what water they are consuming. Most of it they are consuming in the evening right before bed.
Right.
And then a lot of times these are the same people that are complaining that they're getting up at night to urinate and
Yeah.
and things like that. So your body can only process water at so fast of a rate. So if you are chugging large amounts
Mm-hmm.
of water in short time periods, some of that is just kind of getting flushed right through and
Yeah.
isn't really being functionally used by your body.
And we also want to talk for our athletes or anyone who is really busy, think about pre-hydration
Yes.
as well as. So we find that trying to like stay hydrated during the day. So when we talked about that half your body weight in ounces, that is kind of like the minimum. If you know you are going to be really hot and sweaty, whether it's the summertime and you know you're going to be out all day, or if you were planning to do a really intense workout,
Mm-hmm.
you want to think about trying to get that hydration in throughout. Like if you're working out in the evening, try and do like bulk up your hydration throughout the day. Or if it's early in the morning, kind of think the day before
Yeah.
almost. Like Stacey said, we can only absorb roughly about 4 ounces at a time is how much we can, like our kidneys can handle before we start just kind of getting rid of it.
Yep.
So keep that in mind for
Keep
throughout the
that,
day.
yes, keep that in mind. And I do like to warn people that if you've been living life on the dehydrated side and you're like, okay, I am going to focus and I am going to do this, and you jump right up to those recommended amounts, yes, you are going to feel like you need to urinate frequently. Your body is like,
Mm-hmm.
what do I do with all this fluid? That would be temporary. So I do recommend that you kind of ease into this goal.
Yeah.
The first thing that you can do is track how much fluid you're actually consuming. So that's,
Mm-hmm.
again, we're talking about those Bladder Diaries,
Yeah.
where that can come in really handy. Because sometimes what people think they're drinking or how often they think they're going to the bathroom
It's not
isn't
the
always
same.
super
Mm-mm.
accurate. So actually tracking it for a couple days, you might be surprised with how little or how much water
Mm-hmm.
you are not drinking. And the other thing to keep in mind with that is that if you are drinking something that is caffeinated, caffeine is a diuretic,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that it makes your kidneys function faster so that you are urinating more.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that you are processing out more of that water. So technically,
Right.
if you're consuming caffeinated beverages, that actually does not count really towards your fluid intake. You
Yeah.
need to actually be consuming more water to kind of compensate for that. So just kind of be aware of that and just ease into these things,
Mm-hmm.
and don't be shocked if you're like, oh,
This is a big
I've
change. Right.
yeah, this is a big change for my body. I've been dehydrated for 25 years and now I drank a bunch of water one day and I feel like I have to pee a lot, so I better stop doing this. Like, don't get frustrated, ease into it. You've got this.
Habits, a lot of this is about habits, and
Mm-hmm.
habits can take time to change. The other thing that drinking more water will do for you is going to affect how constipated or maybe how not constipated you are.
Absolutely.
So when I have my clients do their bladder diaries, I have another column on there that talks about bowel movements. So I want people to track how often they're going to the bathroom and what that kind of bowel movement is like. So this is something that we talk about pretty frequently.
A lot,
Yeah.
a lot. When your bowels have stool in them that is not easily being passed,
Mm-hmm.
there's only so much room in your pelvis.
Yeah.
So that rectum is right behind the bladder. So if you have a bunch of stool that is in that rectum, it is going to press on the back of the bladder, which does not make the bladder very happy. And B, if you're having to strain a lot to be able to pass that bowel movement, then that is straining downward on that bladder as well. So the easier you know,
Less effortful.
less effortful, daily soft bowel movements that you can have actually can have a dramatic effect on your bladder as well.
Yeah, and also that straining can play a role in that stress incontinence because those pelvic floor muscles, they are the same muscles that relax to allow us to have a bowel movement, as are the same ones that work with our bladder to relax to allow us to pee. But they also have to be able to come back to that nice, relaxed resting position, ready to go. So they're on when we need them and relaxed when we don't.
Yep.
And that brings us to activity.
Our bodies like to move.
And that helps with our bowel movements, but it also just helps with general muscle tone.
General muscle tone, oxygenation, and blood flow with nutrients to some of those deeper core muscles. It just makes your body very happy if you can find a way that you can move that is comfortable, that is enjoyable, something that you can do consistently,
Right.
and it not feel like a major chore.
And if you've stopped your activities, if you've stopped going to the gym, if you've stopped like leaving your house for like longer trips than like say 20 minutes because your bladder is taking charge of your life, that's something to really consider because this has a knock-on effect on every aspect of your life. Not only your physical health, but your mental health too. So don't let your bladder be the boss.
Nope. And they're seeing that in the research. They're seeing that one of the number one reasons that women are reporting to having stopped doing an exercise that they loved was because of either leaking or fear of leaking. So let's address that. Let's get you back to doing the activities that you love. A, because you love them, and B, just to kind of keep that general health.
It all works together. So the pelvic floor doesn't live in isolation.
No, it does. It definitely has to work in coordination with your ab muscles, with your back muscles, with your diaphragm, your breathing muscle. All of that is going to play in to how much pressure is on your bladder at any given time.
Right.
And that pelvic floor, like we had kind of briefly touched on earlier, it can be weak, it can be tight,
Right.
it can be uncoordinated. There can be lots of different things going on. So it's not just a matter of Kegels, which is, Google's answer to
Everything.
And that's not necessarily the case. So you want to kind of take a step back and look at how you're performing activities as a whole. We all know that saying, lift with your legs, not with your back. How that can affect your pelvic floor is if you're bending forward to lift things, you're crunching through that abdomen. That's going to be a lot of downward pressure. But at the same time, if you have a knee injury and therefore you physically cannot get into the squat position to lift with your legs, not with your back, just knowing that saying isn't going to actually allow you to do the activity.
Right.
And that is where, working one-on-one with a pelvic rehab provider, can be helpful as well. Or even just like through virtual coaching, anything like that, we need to look at how you're moving as a whole. Not just can you do 1,000 Kegels at a stoplight or whatever Google recommends.
Right. And I think thinking about that system as a whole, so when we breathe, our diaphragm works with our pelvic floor. So just that active breathing, that nice, slow, deep inhale, that we get a response in our pelvic floor. So when you breathe in and out, are you feeling anything down there? And you should be able to feel something
in your pelvic floor
when you inhale. I know, right? Mind blowing.
Well, and you should just be able to tune into that area in general. I would say time and time and time again, I get patients that are, there's so many factors in this. I've got patients that, will say, oh, I was raised in a very conservative household where we did not talk about our pelvises. We didn't talk about down there.
Right.
And it's like their brain never really totally created a map of the area. I have other patients that were like, oh yeah, I used to be super strong. I could do my Kegels, I could lift, I could do this, I could do that. And then I had a baby or, all sorts of different factors that can go into that where they just feel like either they've never had very good pelvic floor awareness, or maybe they did and then, XYZ happened and now they don't. But you should be able, just sitting, watching this video, if you think about your pelvic floor, what does that feel like in your body?
Mm-hmm.
Does your brain like, yeah, I know where that is and I have this nice little map of it? Or are you sitting there going, pelvic floor?
Do you find like when you try to do something with your pelvic floor, like that Kegel that everyone talks about, are
Mm-hmm.
you really just squeezing your butt,
Mm-hmm.
or contracting your abs? That's something that we see quite a bit is that when people believe, and that's the challenge with these like doing 1,000 Kegels to fix your stress
Mm-hmm.
incontinence. Are you doing an actual Kegel or are you squeezing all the muscles around
Around
those
it.
pelvic floors?
Absolutely. And I have time and time again, and the longer I work with patients, the more and more I'm seeing that life is stressful.
Yeah.
Everyone holds their stress differently, but I am seeing more and more women that are really essentially holding their stress in their pelvic floor. So they'll say, when I try to do a Kegel, I feel like I can't. And then when we're actually doing an internal assessment and doing some testing on their pelvic floor, what we're finding is that their pelvic floor is just tense all the
Mm-hmm.
time.
Yeah.
That is where they are holding their stress. And if you think about, if you take your hammock and you pull it tight,
Mm-hmm.
and then they say, okay, can you go ahead and pull your hammock tight? And you're going to be like, no, I can't. It's
It's got
already
nowhere to
tight.
go. Yeah.
And so you can see where, if you're feeling like I don't feel like I can do a Kegel, or I'm not sure if I'm performing a Kegel, or it feels like nothing moves when I try to do a Kegel,
Mm-hmm.
you could really be at either end of that spectrum. You could either be like the pelvic floor is so tight that it has nowhere left to go, nothing left to contract, or there could be some significant weakness there from, childbirth trauma or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so really knowing what end of that spectrum you're on can make a world of difference for whether or not you should be even doing any Kegels.
Right. And that's where we come in. Like,
Mm-hmm.
where do you start? So, we've given you all this information, and now what do we do with it? And I think it always, at least for me, comes back to breathing.
Breathing is so important. So,
Yeah.
so, so important. And I also like to, even if you feel like, oh no, I'm pretty sure that I'm just weak, that I'm not holding any tension, I still start everybody with relax.
Yeah.
Because if you are relaxing a muscle that is weak, you're just giving it a break and it will enjoy that and it will be happier because of it.
Right.
If you are contracting a muscle that's held in tension, you could potentially be making your symptoms worse.
Right.
And I also like to say, you can't contract what you can't relax. If my arm is like this and you told me to contract my bicep, I can't. So I start everything with breathing and relaxing, which I know sounds so, so simple, but it is the base to everything.
And when you're breathing, people can get a little bit kind of like worked up about breathing in the sense of that, like, oh, I do belly breathing all the time. We want to think about breathing a little bit differently, more in terms of like a 360-degree breath.
Yes.
Because we're really trying to connect that relationship between our diaphragm, which is a dome on the top, and our pelvic floor, which is at the bottom. So when we inhale, our diaphragm descends and our pelvic floor relaxes. So even if you're not sure or you don't have that strong map of your pelvic floor, if you're doing a nice deep 360-degree inhale, your pelvic floor is going to naturally, subtly descend. You're going to feel some movement, especially if you're taking your time and you're paying attention. And then when you exhale, our diaphragm comes back to its resting position and our pelvic floor rises with it. It comes back to its own resting position. So you can start there, that nice deep inhale, everything descends. Exhale, everything contracts. I'm making the inhale and the exhale nice and slow too.
And if you're having a hard time feeling like, okay, I can't feel my diaphragm, I don't feel my pelvic floor. So, okay, so what can you be feeling for? So sometimes I'll have people kind of place a hand on chest and belly, or I'll have people kind of do hands like this around their rib cage. And you should just feel a nice, gentle expansion all around. So it shouldn't be, and it shouldn't be just belly, but just that general idea of, and relaxing through. And we're going to go into that in a little bit more detail. Plus, we are going to have an additional supplemental video as well.